phone and they need to mute themselves. Thank you. Please note that the meeting is going to be recorded. Mr. McElroy, would you like to call us to order?
Yes, I will. Let it be known that we call into order the Empowerment Congress Charter Reform Working Group. You all see the agenda in front of you. My name is Harry McElroy. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Empowerment Congress. And so we're not going to go all the way around the Zoom and introduce everybody, are we?
I'm not sure that
we've got nearly 30 people, so I don't think that's necessary.
No.
Yep.
No.
Okay, so you see the purpose is we want to update and give a perspective on the status of the council deliberation on the charter reform. Well, we sent a letter out. We want to talk about the lack of response to that letter and talk about amendment proposals. And, we've got the survey going on, so we want to review those results and talk about future work. So let's get into it.
All right. I don't see Pastor Eddie on this. Is he up? Okay.
Yeah, he's up. Let's see, let's look at the participants.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe I know that Carolina has been tracking a lot of this stuff. Would you mind giving us an update on where things stand?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what I know. Hi, everyone. Carolina Goodman from the League of Women Voters of Greater Los Angeles. So the ad hoc committee has actually received and the final report from the CLA and has is passing their recommendations along to the larger city council, but they're waiting a few weeks so that public can provide feedback. And so we're expecting to see that come up in an agenda at the end of November or the beginning of December. The conversation has all been around independent redistricting, and they haven't addressed council expansion. So that's what I know. Are there any questions that I can answer specifically?
I don't think so, not at this time. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. In Pastor Eddie's absence, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Raphe Sonenshein to some of us. Most of us already know him and his work. He is a longtime geek / wonk associated with the issues of charter reform, as most of you know. And I suspect that he will share with us his new assignment, having separated now for several months from the Pat Brown Institute at Cal State LA, where he was the executive director for what?
11 years.
11 years, right. And now he is the head of a foundation, a public policy related foundation that's focused on issues associated principally with the city of Los Angeles. And hopefully, by way of self-introductory remarks, he can share with us what his current assignment is. We have asked him to discuss the current process of charter reform, the reform priorities that the Ad hoc Governance Committee appears to be undertaking, as well as any opportunities and prospects for broader charter reform. As the agenda had indicated, we were hoping that he could touch on this issue of the Independent Redistricting Commission, council expansion. I know that there have been other issues associated with the idea of a periodic charter review and more substantive commitments to regulatory ethics reform. So with that by way of introduction, I'd like to now turn it over to Raphe Sonenshein. Raphe?
Thank you. Thanks, Vincent. Thanks for having me. I always love visiting my friends at the Empowerment Congress who go all the way back to my last charter reform in 97 and 99, when it was the model of the Empowerment Congress that convinced us on the charter commissions that it would be possible to create a neighborhood council system that worked. It was the only working example of the kind of neighborhood participation that was very much on our mind. So I feel like we're coming full circle. You stole my thunder. I was going to introduce myself as a charter geek, Vincent, but all I can tell you is that I'm always ready to talk charter. I carry two things in the trunk of my car: a baseball glove and my charter, because one of two things could break out. A baseball game could break out, and I am available should any of you have game and I pass you by, or there could be tonight a charter discussion. So this is both a vocation and an avocation for me. I just love talking about the city charter and charters in general. Charter reform, believe it or not, is not a calm, thoughtful process where wise people get together in a room and have a thorough discussion about the ideal forms of government and then come up with a working solution. It's a combination of some of that and a lot of politics and a lot of back and forth, and a lot of times when it looks like nothing is ever going to happen, and then suddenly things happen in a positive way. So I'm now re-engaged with charter reform, and I want to tell you a little bit about how that is. By the way, Vincent, just because you asked, my new position is to be executive director of the foundation, the first executive director in the 98 years of the foundation's existence. Wow. And we'll be putting out a grant proposal for academics to apply in the area of governance and democracy in Los Angeles. I know Carolina and the league are going to be very interested in what comes out of all this, and this is a very exciting time for the foundation and exciting for me. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know to know that not too long ago, City Hall was turned upside down by the release of a series of devastating recordings that basically threw everything up in the air. Everything changed. The leadership at the city council changed. The city council itself changed. People were really spent quite some time thinking, what are we going to do about this? It affected intergroup relations for quite a while in a very severe and devastating way. And that's really where we were at the start. But after a few months, there began to be the feeling that perhaps it might be time for the city to revisit some charter reforms to make governance better. And the last time I remember that happening was in the late 1990s, when the city looked like it was going to tear itself apart over secession. And it was the crisis of secession that led to some kind of charter reform. So a reminder that disaster is often the precursor to structural change. Big structural changes don't happen for no good reason. If you recall, in 1992, the most famous charter reform of all time in Los Angeles was Proposition F, which followed after all the catastrophic events of 1991. I still think it's the most important and valuable charter reform ever made in Los Angeles. So I wouldn't say we compare this date to that. Not long after this all happened, the new city council leadership began to think some about fixing the redistricting process, which was, of course, the core discussion in the recordings. And you usually start out by fixing what appears to be. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just muted for a sec. You usually start out by fixing what appears to be in front of you, like to stop the bleeding, but then it morphs perhaps into some bigger thinking. Around that time, I was approached by some of the leaders of philanthropy in Los Angeles who said that they thought that it was possible that it might be difficult for the city council by itself to reform itself, and asked me and others to create a group of independent academics from area universities who could bring an independent perspective, having no horse in the race of who would benefit and who would not benefit from reform. We jumped at the opportunity to serve the community, and 6 of us, one of whom is on the call here, who some of you may know, Professor Boris Ricks, one of my oldest friends from Cal State Northridge, and Boris is somewhere listening into us right now. So he and I held the flag of the Cal State system. Me then at Cal State LA, we had USC, UCLA, LMU, and Pomona College, and we had a really wonderful group, and we have been together ever since for a year. And as you know, those of you who are sports fans, it's hard to keep a team together. People come and go. We have not moved from our working together on a regular basis. We've created our own little, I don't know, informal charter commission. And in the process, we stayed very close to other organizations. We've been in touch with the League of Women Voters, with the Civic Alliance, but on a regular basis with Our LA, which is a coalition of large numbers of organizations, which includes the Empowerment Congress, and Common Cause, and trying to make sure that there's a broad community voice so that the council can hear all the best thinking that's out there. Well, after a while, the council then moved forward while that was happening and created the ad hoc committee that Carolina was talking about, which I think has actually been a pretty responsible group. They've been moving, holding steady meetings. They have a very good person in the CLA's office, John Wickham, who's done a great deal of research. They've talked to us a lot, but we have kept our independence. In addition, we got enough funding to conduct focus groups and surveys, and we now have results of those surveys that are independent. We'll be presenting those in the next few weeks, and in December, right around the time when this goes to the city council, we're going to present our final report of recommendations to the community and the city council. And I emphasize, we don't work for the city council. We work for the community and for independent academia, but we respect the public officials, and we're going to present it to everybody. My reading on what's been going on at City Hall is that redistricting has continued to be foremost in the minds of the city council, but not foremost in our minds. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The city council committee has focused, as Carolina said, most of their attention on creating an independent redistricting process, which is, by the way, widely supported. The real question is what would it look like? There was a fear that the state of California legislature would come in and write it themselves if it wasn't written here, which I never thought was actually going to happen. And it looks like the council is coming close to something where they heard from us, they heard from Common Cause, the League, Our LA, and many others. They have released a draft and they will be voting on it. But from the start, our group had a different perspective. We thought this was an opportunity for a 3-part project, which would increase the size of the city council. And by the way, if you want people to like that proposal, don't say increase the size of the city council, say decrease the size of city council districts. Now, I don't have to tell you that, what am I saying? But I mean, the fact is, polling actually shows that. We have to be honest about it. It is increasing the size of the city council and decreasing the size of the districts. It's really hard to sort of play that both ways. So, but the third one that we interjected into the debate, along with others, was that you cannot do reform at City Hall without a significant upgrading of the ethics structure at City Hall. And in our mind, that has meant empowering the Ethics Commission, which in 1991, when it was passed by the voters, was one of the most, if not the most advanced ethics system in any city in the United States. It no longer is. It's still very good, but other cities and counties have learned and have moved ahead. And it seems to us, and we've just been talking about this in the last few days, we're going to propose a series of what we hope will be far-reaching recommendations on ethics reform that will, we think, in the voters' minds, have an impact on the thing they're most concerned about at City Hall right now, which is ethics. So to us, this should be a large reform package, and it should go on the ballot in November of 2024. That seems now to be what people believe is right. There has been a feeling that the city council has to get this to bed right now. But actually, if this is going to go on the ballot in November, it does not have to be done until the spring. So there's time to do it right. And what I think December is going to be a great month for reform. We will have our proposal out there. Our LA will have a similar, but with their own views. Common Cause will have it. The city council will have theirs. We'll have polling. We'll have your surveys. We'll have our surveys. We'll have the focus groups that our LA has done. Let's make this a big community-wide conversation. Now, a wrinkle that has emerged is a discussion about whether there should be a charter reform commission created, one, and two, whether we should go beyond items that are even in the group of three that we're talking about. There's a little bit in which we may go a little beyond it, if only because some parts of ethics reform can be found in other parts of the city charter, especially the sections about suspension, vacancy, and other issues like that, where violations of ethics laws are actually written into the charter as having an impact on all those issues. So we may sort of look at some of that within the umbrella of that. Look, I can tell you that I'm never going to say no to a charter reform happening, because I just love charter commissions. I just think they're the greatest thing in the world. You know, to me, they're just like fun, like the World Series of reform. I'm sorry, by the way, I'm done with baseball analogies now. You can just relax a little bit, or I'll pick a different activity. The only concern I would have is if the move to have a charter commission is going to slow down the process, because it's difficult to get consensus, not on redistricting, but on council size and on ethics reform, and sort of punt it over to a charter commission. And that indeed could put us in a position to miss those two items for the November 2024 election. I think, on the other hand, if we take the long view and have a great reform election in 2024 November, looking then at what else needs to be done would actually be a very productive thing, and we could all join in that. I can see parts of the charter, even after our work in the 90s, that are in great need of help. One is land use policy and the role of the city council in land use. Another one is the whole section on vacancy, suspensions, compensation, all that happens in terms of, we've had many, many open seats and a lot of turnover in the city council. A little bit of work on the issue about acting mayor. If you remember, when it looked like Eric Garcetti was going to be having an opportunity to leave at some point, there was a question about how long the council president would become acting mayor. And I kept asking people, have they answered the following question? If the council president becomes acting mayor and there's a year left in the term, and the mayor vetoes an ordinance coming from the city council where the acting mayor continues to be the council president, do they get to vote whether or not to override their own veto? I discovered, by the way, I could not, I'm no lawyer, so I can have fun with this stuff. I couldn't find any lawyer who could answer that question. Now, I thought it would be wildly entertaining if that happened, but probably not the essence of good government. In other words, there's plenty of work to do at City Hall. That being said, it's perfectly possible that our moment is going to be November of 2024. And that the best ideas, the safest thing to do is to plan between now and the spring to get those ideas into the package that goes in November. I'd be very disappointed if all we did was independent redistricting and did not deal with the fact of how large our council districts are, the limits of representation that that creates. And I would be very disappointed if we miss the opportunity on ethics reform, which doesn't come around very often. And organizations like the League of Women Voters and Common Cause are not sunshine patriots, as they used to say, on ethics reform. They're on this 365 days a year, but the opportunities to do something about it don't come along very often. And when they do, I think it would be a terrible shame to miss it. Personally, I would actually like to see some clarifications in the sections on around Article 207 and related articles about suspension and removal and what happens after that. You can never predict what things will challenge sections of the charter until they're challenged by real life. And then you think maybe you should fix it. Last thought is, don't forget, there's always a temptation for charter reform to fix the last problem and not anticipate the next problem. And if you're really doing it right, you're not just fixing the part of your house that doesn't work well, you're actually trying to fix the whole house as much as you can so it will last 20, 25 years without needing a major overhaul. It's been 30 years since we did that in LA. And so I guess I'm of two minds on this idea of a charter commission. I don't want to hold up what could really seriously take place in November of 2024, which could be a great moment. At the same time, I do like the idea at a moment where we're concerned about the performance of LA government and public trust in LA government, which I can tell you without revealing too much about our survey, would it shock you to know there is not terrific trust in LA city government among the voters that we talked to? Well, that was true in the 90s. That was driving secession, along with other things that were driving secession. And the solution is not to tell people not to worry, it's to try to make things work better. And this is one of the few tools that we have. Last thing, just so everybody will know, because I've been asked this question, if there were to be a charter commission, how would it be created? There are two ways to have a charter commission. One is the city council can create a charter commission by ordinance, and its recommendations would go back to the city council for approval. I don't think I'm exaggerating to say it might be difficult to get people right now at this moment to think the best idea is for the city council to have a veto of the recommendations of a charter reform commission. But the other one also has its own downsides. Under state law, you can create an elected commission that would go directly to the ballot. The downside of that is you got 11, in effect, politicians running as charter reform commissioners. And God bless LA, in 1997, the city did both of them at the same time. Perhaps the only city in the history of the United States to try something as bizarre as that. And it took diplomatic skill at the highest level of the two commissions to reach an agreement that was about as hard as the Bosnia conflict and managed to come up with a single charter proposal. You don't want to place yourself in that situation. But we're all going to have to educate ourselves about this. But all I would say is, let's fix everything we can now, but let's also keep our minds and eyes open to what else is possible, because that's what makes this stuff so exciting. Final point, the reason charter reform worked in 1999 despite the immense obstacles, including the fact that the mayor and city council loathed each other beyond words. I personally, professionally, could not stand each other. The elected commission was Mayor Reardon's commission. My commission, the appointed commission of which I was executive director, was considered the council's commission. It wasn't because they settled their conflict. It was because community pressure was brought to bear by a civic arena of massive scale that eventually drew the Los Angeles Times, the Daily News, and others in to say that an agreement had to be reached and had to be supported that could be done by the whole community. Or put another way, charter reform is too important to be left to the elected officials. And at the end of the day, whether you do an elected commission or appointed commission, the final vote can only be done by a vote of the people. So why not have the people participate early, middle, and late, and just make us all geeks for a short time and really draw ourselves into it. So how about could I take some questions? Would you have time for some questions?
Absolutely, yes. Why don't we do this? I'm gonna change the gallery so everybody can see one another. And if you want to raise your hand, I can call on folks. Let me first lead off by asking you, Raphe, what you would advise entities like the Empowerment Congress to do to get the ad hoc governance committee's attention with any specific proposals that we might have about what we think the council ought to do.
Well, you've said half of it already. You've said half of it already, Vincent, which is specific proposals.
Those are the people that need to be invited.
Oh, yeah. Whoops. Oh, okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. You have to come with specific proposals because that's the currency of the realm. And they may or may not respond, but you have to give them something in which they have to have an up and down response to it. They get very soft with broad proposals, but you know that because you've been in this work for a long time. The other thing is I noticed on your agenda you've been doing surveys. And I presume surveys of the membership, surveys of the community groups that are part of this. That is very powerful. That is very important. In fact, I'm here to tell you this was not true back in '99. Everybody who's coming to the table is coming to the table with information about what they're hearing from people who are not themselves, who are sort of outside the core of the organization. And in order to get a hearing, any type of survey, whether formal, informal, scientific, random sample, focus group, discussion group, really has a lot to offer there. The other thing is to keep in mind that proposals don't only have to be brought to the city council, they can be brought to the other players who are presenting proposals to the city council because they're aware at City Hall that they don't have the monopoly on this debate. And I think that's because of the nature of what's been going on at City Hall the last couple of years. So having the League of Women Voters, having our group, having our LA, Common Cause, and others, and even drawing some interest from some of the opinion makers in the media around specific proposals, even just to get it on the table for discussion. I mean, look at what we're struggling with. We're trying to make sure that proposals 2 and 3 don't drop off. I mean, so we're trying to just keep the conversation going around council size and ethics. And if you have an additional item, I think about specific proposals. I can honestly say if you're talking to the council, they respond well to things like charter sections, which I'm surprised how many times people don't bring charter sections in front of the city council, because that's what their CLA report is telling them. So anyway, that's more than you asked for, Vincent, but I think it's all there because you have a base in a constituency. And that's important to them. They may not like it. I'm not saying they're going to be cheering at hearing from the community, but I think they have to respect it.
I see that Pastor Eddie has joined us. Pastor Eddie, I was sort of moderating. You want to take over now, please? Pastor Eddie, can you hear us?
I'm here.
Okay. You want to take over?
Sure. Hey, Raphe.
Hey, Pastor Eddie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, great to see you.
Thank you for the ways you've been enlightening the conversation. I know from the RLA standpoint, it's been very hard to get the council to listen to some of our complaints, to the point that in one of the meetings, they didn't even read the report, and we were trying to help them see what was going on. So next person up for a question is Carolina and Shanna from Fair Rep.
By the way, before you get to Carolina, we were on the phone today with RLA and Common Cause discussing all these proposals because we're cognizant that not everybody is getting access to the discussion at City Hall and that we're really part of a coalition. And we're trying to maintain that as much as we can. I hear what you're saying about that. Sorry, Carolina.
Thanks, everyone. It's Carolina. Carolina.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've known you all
That's
this
okay,
time and I've
no
been saying your
problem.
name wrong.
You know, Carolina is like North Carolina and South Carolina, but Carolina,
I like it.
My heritage is Filipino, which, as you know, we were occupied by the Spanish for 300 years. That's why I have the name Carolina. So I have two questions. One has to do with Raphe. What is your thought about implementation earlier than 2032 or 2030?
Okay.
And the other question, I forgot that, but can you address that one? And then I'll remember my other question.
This is one of the most intriguing questions. Carolina, I'm never going to get it wrong again. With my name, where I've been called everything from Raphe to Riff to everything, I should get everybody else's name right. And I really do try. So I'm never going to forget that. Here's the debate that I find just fascinating. And Boris and I know that we're in the middle of this conversation with our own group. Some people, especially on the city council, would like it to be 2032, which has a virtue that, you got all the time in the world to get it all prepared. The problem, and it's also convenient because all the council members can get to finish their 3 terms in the seats they like, which probably increases the love factor from the council for the proposals. At the same time, I think I'm going to be a lot older in 2032. And I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I'll probably be, doing some other type of work or something. It's a long way away. It's 9 years away. So there's a certain impatience to do it right away. And I'm hearing from quite a few folks, let's just do it for 2016. Let's just ramp this thing up. Now, what others are saying, and it's a concern of mine, is that ramping this up when we all want to have a very wide-ranging community participation in the next redistricting process, you want to hire staff, and you can't start until January of 2025 after it's passed, and the next primary will be in March of 2026. So you've got essentially 1 year to do the whole thing. And if you're going to go to an independent process, you don't want to wreck it the first time out. So there's another school of thought to do it in between, perhaps in 2028. I think this is going to actually be one of the most contentious issues of the implementation. It's a sleeper issue, and I'm so glad you raised it. And the council really is going to lean toward 32, but there's community pressure. I know our LA started at 2026, but I think like us, they have to think about the feasibility of it getting done. So there's at least 3 alternatives on the table, 26, I think I said 16, 26, 28, and 32. Nobody said 30, because I guess if you're at 30, why not just go to 32? Just use the 2030 census. What does they say? Watch this space. This is going to be a real hot one. And I think everybody's kind of avoiding it, but we're debating it in our group. And actually, Boris and I just sat in the meeting today talking about it. Boris, would you say that's one of the big ones?
That is definitely a point of academic bickering, to say
And
the
we can
least.
bicker. We're academics. We know how to bicker.
Thank you, Raphe. I did remember my other question. The other question has to do with reducing council district size. I don't want
That was
you
very
to-
politic of you to say that
Right.
instead of increasing the size of the city council. Okay.
I didn't want you to give away your survey, but are you able to address that question in some fashion?
I have been astonished. I'm not going to give it away because I just saw some of the results today and we have to sort of go through them and all that. You know how this world is. Can I give you a bit of perspective, Carolina? In 97 and 98, when we asked voters about this, one of the pollsters called me and said, when I asked a random survey question, the person told me, I won't tell you what the person told him, and said, I'm hanging up the phone and don't ever call me again on anything. That's how unpopular it was. And it was crushingly defeated 2-1. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with it. And this time, our survey is showing considerable support for, and I'll say it, I'll put the words out there, increasing the size of the city council. I'd say it is substantially more popular than it was in the mid-1990s. And I think, honestly, I think it has to do with a different electorate, a younger electorate, and the argument about representation, I think, is going to be a very compelling one. And even though politicians are particularly unpopular right now at City Hall, it is actually polling surprisingly well. And I kept telling everybody, be prepared for terrible input from the voters on this. And I have to admit, it hasn't been nearly as terrible as I thought. I mean, people are concerned, of course, about cost and things like that. But I guess what I'm getting at is you couldn't even start a conversation in 1998 about it. They didn't even want to talk about it. So I think it has it'll be the least popular of the 3 because independent redistricting and ethics reform, just that title alone is enough to carry it, most likely. But I'd say council expansion actually has a fighting chance.
Well, the question is whether it's an evolution or a contradiction. When we think about where we were in the 90s, in the context in which we were dealing with charter reform, dealing with ethics issues, et cetera, and the antipathy toward those in public office, I think what has to be indexed, Raphe, Boris, Shikari, is what that antipathy level is now compared to what it was then, and why then is there more openness to the expansion of elected bodies when those who occupy those roles are the butt of derision and even worse. So this is why I say, is it an evolution in the thinking of the electorate, or is it just simply flat out a contradiction in terms of what we would otherwise think to be an inconsistency of consequence?
Let me ask my favorite pollster, who I first met in one of your presentations, Mark,
Right.
Shikari. How would you answer that question, Shikari?
And you're joining with the good doctor to put me on the spot here.
You can handle it. We know.
I'm intrigued by what I see as a contradiction there. And I think on the one hand, it's a desire for more authentic representation, which would be signaled by the expansion of the council. We often find that residents are supportive of their particular council person, but have unfavorable views of the council overall or particular council members outside of their districts. And so, building a real winning consensus, I think, we'll need to tangle with that contradiction, but I think some of it is likely related to the fact that people like their own representative and see a potential for greater reflection in their representation and representation of their interests with the larger council than they would the current 15 members.
I actually hadn't thought about it that way, and it reminds me that if one of the arguments is it's smaller district, you'll have greater access to your council member. If you like your council member, that would be a plus. That would mean you'd be competing with fewer people in the district to get attention. The other thing is, in the 90s, we still had the remnants of the Prop 13 constituency.
Right.
And that constituency didn't just dislike politicians, they disliked the government.
Government.
And what we're saying is, take as a given, you don't like something called politicians as a generic group, but you still have a certain sense that government's going to provide services and support. And that's a different view from constituents than was popular. The 90s was a time when government itself was derided, not just politicians. And we can live with, no offense meant to any current, future elected officials, we can live with politicians not being popular. We have a lot of trouble with government being not popular, because that's the heart of the matter.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that illumination, Raphe, and Shikari, and the good Dr. MRT. Hopefully you had a great birthday. Dorsey and Jennifer, we're running short on time, so I'm going to ask you both to ask your questions. Dorsey first, then Jennifer, and then Raphe will let you just respond to those questions. Dorsey?
Hi, good evening, Raphe. Good
Hi.
to see you and hear you, and congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
My question, I guess, really has to do again with the people and what can the people do. To me, the people are now far more interested in what's going on in City Hall than they've ever been before. We've been through a pandemic. We're in 2008, we were in another crisis. People are, losing their homes, have lost their homes, more working poor. So they have a real interest in what's happening. And my question is, what can we do? What is it that we need to do to move things along and to have our voices really heard prior to everything that's going to happen?
That's like the question of the day in so many ways. And with charter stuff, Dorsey, it is harder and more difficult to answer that than, say, issues, where we go with constituents, with organized groups, and we go and we lobby for one particular thing. The first step to be really heard in all this is to literally be in the audience when the discussions are happening. And it's a pretty small number of people who are following this in the city. Look, you don't have to be a geek to subscribe to the hearings of the ad hoc committee, but it's useful to be a geek to do that. This is something where the council members are really surprised when there's somebody sitting in the office who A, isn't yelling at them, which is a certain percentage, or is just screaming at them all the time, and B, isn't necessarily asking them for something, but is just exercising their democratic curiosity to find this thing out. Those people can wander up and talk to the staffs and the council members and just keep posing questions. That being said, at some point, though, you have to unite around a proposal or two and take that proposal forward. But I think they're quite surprised by people who actually get interested in this. You're right, Dorsey. They assume the public is not interested in this. Absolutely. And I am finding I'm having more conversations about this stuff at City Hall around town than I've had in years. I think probably since actually more than when we did charter reform in the 90s, more. And if you run a poll, people have answers. They've got things they want to talk about. So I think to be an attentive listener and talker in the charter conversation puts you at the head of the class faster than on an issue, than on a regular issue, because it's great stuff. I hope that's helpful, but I mean, it's just a way of saying they're not used to people taking an interest in this.
Well, I think that's what we need to do, is take more of an interest.
Absolutely. And if
I'll go with you.
Yeah, we're here tonight. We'll keep moving. Jennifer, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. It's a quick one. And it's kind of practical. If you were going to go ahead with the idea of districts being lessened or council members being increased, would it be all districts, or would it be things where some districts are more populated or more land whatever?
It's a great question. According to federal law, all districts have, as near as practically possible, have to be equal in population. And by the way, that's all people, adults, children, everybody. Has to be roughly equal in pop. It doesn't have to be exact, because you can't be exact, but you cannot have unequally sized districts, with the exception that it is possible to have some seats that are of a regional basis, but they would have to be equal in population. You can't mix and match the same kind of seats with different populations. So you'd have to, if it was 21 or 25 members of the city council, you'd have to redraw the lines. So each district would be somewhat smaller. And it would create a lot of chaos, maybe good chaos. You know, it would kind of mix things up a little bit at City Hall. But there's a worry in people's minds, which you can't deny, that communities will lose representation that has been customary for a very long time. And, you know, of course, I've been studying LA politics, you know, from the history of it all the way through the 50s, and the challenge of winning seats in the 8th, 9th, and 10th district was one of the most historic movements in the history of modern Los Angeles. And of course, you know, there's a lot of turmoil around, particularly in the 9th district, about what's likely to happen there in the future. So sometimes people prefer the known that you're used to and kind of figure is the best way to make it work, and the unknown of trying to figure out how would those seats be allocated, who would win those seats in some way. And that becomes something that becomes a reservation people have. And at the same time, it could be possible that more seats would be competitive. We don't know. And the unknown can be quite disconcerting. So that's going to be in people's minds, I would say.
Well, I'm from CD1, and that's highly populated.
Well, it's highly populated, but it's identical in population to the other districts. If what you mean is the population as a whole, it has to be almost the same as the other districts.
I see what you're saying. Well,
number
certain
of voters
parts
could be a lot. The voters could be quite a bit smaller. There are some districts that had many more voters than others.
And also areas are more dense than others.
Correct. Now, for power at City Hall, especially in citywide issues, the number of voters in a district is quite important, because that can carry citywide races. And historically, now you're going to get me into true geekhood. 2 districts that have had some of the highest turnout, 3 districts historically, are the 8th council district, the 5th council district on the west side, and the 12th in the northwest San Fernando Valley. And that has really affected the city's politics. But they're equal in population, but the 8th historically had very, very high voter participation.
It's empowerment, Congressman.
Well, I thought maybe people, yes, we might realize that had something to do with it.
Just quickly, I wanted to say, Professor Rex, Professor Sonenshein, what has to be addressed is what we're in search of. From a governance perspective, are we in search of efficiency or equity? And in terms of a refinement of that is, does the expansion of seats lend itself to increased or more effective delivery of services? Similarly, the question has to be asked, what does that do to the decision-making process itself? Does it lend to better decisions, or does it lend itself to more involvement from a democratic perspective, small d?
Well, you've highlighted the fact that there's competing values here when you try to reform government. By the way, my least favorite one is efficiency, because the most efficient government would have no voting at all.
There you go.
You just have college professors like me and Boris would just make all the decisions and tell everybody what to do. Effectiveness, however, is a very high value, because effectiveness is something that people recognize as part of their representational entitlement, that basically the services will be effective. They'll get where they're supposed to go. They'll address real problems. But it's not up to the system to design the problem. It's up to us. If the council's larger, it would be really good if it was combined with a reform of the land use process. Because if you end up with a very large city council where every council member has a veto informally of land use in their district, you could really have even more chaos than there is in the land use process today. On the other hand, you have the opportunity for much greater representation of communities that right now are in districts that are too large for them to have a voice. And that's a value. I don't think the purpose of the city council is to be efficient or effective. I like it when they behave well and when they get things done and bring things to a vote and stuff like that. But they're also a representation body. The efficiency arm of the government, sad to say, we've depended on mayors and departments for efficiency with the oversight of the city council. But I'm a big fan of representation, but I don't want 30, 40, 50 members of the city council. Before you know it, it looks like New York City, where you have the mayor runs everything and the city council, you know, God knows what they do. So
yeah, but I mean, you have to address the fact that the city council is the governing body for the city of Los Angeles. It is the corporate board. It's a weak mayor system. Therefore, its decision-making role and capacity does impinge on the issue of efficiency on operation in the context of governance, as in contrast to the Board of Supervisors, for an example. And so I think there's a need to really clarify a lot of the thinking on this. And Professor Ricks, forgive me jumping in there. I know you had your hand up, but you know, we seize every opportunity to keep Raphe straight, every opportunity to seize it. Yeah. Boris?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. I think it's really important that we take a look at this from one of the angles that probably hasn't been mentioned, but somehow has been alluded to, is the idea of service delivery versus representation.
Mm-hmm.
Do we elect the individual who delivers services, or do we elect the individual that looks like us? And if we look at council expansion, we're going to have to take that into account. Council expansion could possibly increase the number of seats for African Americans, certainly can increase the number of seats for Latinos, and potentially Asian Pacific Islanders. So we have to look at that equation, and at some point, a ground up discussion about coalition politics is going to have to occur, because with the expansion of council seats moving from 15 to 25 or another figure is going to challenge groups and encourage groups to become friends with people whom they may not have been friends with in the past, looking for opportunities to basically share electoral governance along with basically sharing power. And that's something the city of Los Angeles has been really, really good at, whether willingly or unwillingly, has been good at sharing power. Now, the question is the size of cake that I have smaller than the size of cake that someone else has? And then if they have a bigger slice of cake, I want to know why their cake slice is bigger than mine. And that's where that rubber meets the road.
That's a good point around service representation. I think that's the argument that many have been considering. So thank you for that. In the interest of time, we can continue this conversation. I love this conversation. We're going to have to invite folks to get involved in a different way as well around surveying. So can we just give a great empowerment Congress thank you to Professor Sonenshein and Forrest? Can we give them a great round of applause for being here and sharing their knowledge and wisdom with us? There's a question that Raphe, right before you leave, is there a place where residents who are on this call and who want to see the proposals, the one from the academics, one from RLA, one from Fair Rep, is there one place you can go and see that?
There will be more of that in December, but I can tell you where to find our proposal. We put out a draft set of recommendations several months ago. Boris, what's our website called? It's LAGRP? Or let me put the whole thing in.
Okay. You'll put yours in the chat, and then Jeremy, I know you're with RLA. Can you put RLA in the chat? And I think Carolina, you're with Fair Rep, or there may be someone else. Michael, I think Michael was on here. Can you put yours in the chat so people can look at that and read it to answer your question? I saw it earlier. Did not forget you, my sister. Yes, everyone is counted. When they redo redistricting, it's all people who are counted in the census. So if you was counted in the census, you are included in the redistricting. Now is the point of the program where we invite you all to get involved. And so one of the things that we talked about is data and showing up and being, as one mentor of mine said, being loud with data. Don't want to be loud and wrong, want to be loud and have numbers with it. And so we've been doing a survey in the Empowerment Congress. So I want to invite our Courtney and Sandy to lean in and share more about that survey and how all of us can get involved so we can have the data when we say that we need a real charter reform.
Great, good evening. We have been collecting the surveys. At our last meeting, I think we had about 71. I know since then I've had several other people to submit their surveys. So we should be very close to our target, which is to get 100 surveys in. We've learned some lessons from the surveys that we should do. We should work to translate our surveys into other languages, particularly or minimally, let's say Spanish, and consider allowing more anonymity because people had concerns about completing the survey and using their email addresses. So we're going to look into, as we revise this and move forward, we'll make some notations to make those corrections. We found that most of the respondents were somewhat familiar with the LA Charter. And we came up with 5 priorities, and that was ethics and conflicts of interest, land use decision-making and powers of the neighborhood councils, disenfranchisement, redistricting process, circumstances around suspension of council members' pay and benefits. Highest proportion of responses was for when should a council member be suspended, included conviction of a crime as a criteria. Many respondents indicated that unethical actions broadly defined should be considered as a criteria. We found that most respondents believe that the entire city council by a majority of supermajority vote should have the power to suspend a council member. Most respondents believe that a formal open hearing should be part of the process for suspension. Most respondents indicated that public participation is of the highest priority when addressing issues related to council member vacancies. Most respondents indicated that they are most concerned that proposed amendments and reforms to the charter promote. Is there a question? Oh, okay. That amendments and reforms to the charter promote greater transparency, which I think is ultimately important, and accountability to citizens, residents. This opinion is reinforced by the recommendations offered by encouraging participation in the charter reform process. Transparency, inclusion, and accountability are key words included in the responses, along with a call for greater communication regarding the process. So, Courtney has put up some information. Ideas to encourage participation in the charter reform process. And we strongly want to encourage you, if you haven't done the survey, if you know somebody who would be willing to do the survey, please get that information to them and encourage them to submit a survey. And then the other information you can see is here. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I have a question. This is Vincent. I was wondering, are we planning on posting the results of the survey or the content of the survey on the website so that folks can take a look at what we have done?
Yes, the plan is to post the survey results in a more comprehensive report that's a little bit more readable and distilled down from the raw data. So the way that we have the information groups right now is a little all over the place. So we'll have some people review the information before it goes into a final report format that goes onto the website. But yes, all of this information will be available. Earlier in the meeting, Carolina also asked for a link to the letter that we sent to the ad hoc governance committee as well as the full council. And so that will be housed on the website as well, as along with some of the links from the organizations, Raphael, League of Women Voters, that are doing work as well. So it can be a hub for charter reform information to provide more education for people. Are there any questions? Sorry, I'm in a loud place where people have just started talking, but are there any questions?
Yeah, one last question for me, and that is, what did we learn from this process, and what tool did we use to create the survey?
So we used a Google form. As Sandy mentioned at the beginning, some of the lessons learned that we have were just in terms of survey design. Some of the questions weren't written as clearly as they could have been. So people were unclear about the question that they were actually answering, which I think may have skewed the data, as well as the way in which we framed some of the questions. So there was one question, there were a couple of questions that asked people to say what their highest versus lowest priorities were, versus rating things as very important versus very unimportant, which we seem to have more clear data come from the very important versus very unimportant information. But that said, it was a little bit harder to prioritize because since people had the option to say that everything was very important, it manipulated the data as well. So did someone ask the question? Sorry. So yes, so that was one of the things that we learned. We also, as Sandy mentioned, had a request in our last meeting in this space to translate the survey into Spanish, which we didn't have an opportunity to do this time, but translating into different languages for more accessibility would be probably a good idea for us. And then also the timing of how we get the survey out. It was a little bit disjointed from the largest audience that we had for the Charter School conversation, which was our August 8th conversation with Councilmember Paris Jackson. So just making sure that we can move a little bit more quickly to capture the attention of the people that we have in our midst would be helpful as part of our lessons learned. Now we'll section.
Any other questions?
That either means I was extremely clear or so unclear that you don't even want to ask any questions.
Yeah, so can you summarize for us then what we intend to do by way of follow-up?
Follow-up for the survey?
Yeah, this survey, we're posting it on the website, and what else?
That's it. We'll most likely put it into more of a report format that aggregates the data. But we will we'll get it onto the website in a clear format that shares the information as clearly as possible and kind of interpret some of the responses, which were a little bit less clear.
Okay.
And yes, you can absolutely see it when we pass it around, right?
Thank you.
Well, it would make sense to have kind of like an executive summary that we would issue and then have the raw data attached so people who want to see all the specifics would have that to their disposal. I would think that would be my thought on it.
Yeah, Harry, I think you'll recall when Pastor Johnson, Pastor Smart, Pastor Anderson, Sandy Hamilton, Bev Rowe, and others were giving thought to this. It was essentially to amplify the concern from an indigenous perspective about what this whole charter reform issue was about. Ray, if you'll recall, early on, before there was a reawakening of charter talk, you were on KBLA talk radio, giving a historical perspective and leaning into some of the fireworks that emanated from the activity in the 10th district that had to be litigated in order for it to be sorted out.
Yeah.
And so some of what this survey was about, no pretense around scientific, empirically based work, but to elicit organic feedback from those who are paying attention and have something to say, and wanted that then to be communicated to current office holders for the purposes of further reflection and consideration. That's the value of this. And it would seem to me that your point earlier about not to underestimate the strength of coordination, collaboration, and projection with other organizations and entities. These are individuals who have something to say that we're taking time to cull and cultivate. It has value. It is the essence of the Empowerment Congress's mantra to educate, engage, and empower.
Mark, could I add something to that? Elaborate
Yeah,
on that a bit?
Please.
Regardless of what size the sample is, it really means a lot to people if they were surveyed to see the results of the survey appear on the website of the organization.
100.
And
100.
to be treated as, I mean, they went to the trouble to answer the survey. And it's not whether it's 1,000 or 80 or 300 or something like that. You do some good work by simply saying, we started this process, and then it becomes the first of another process, which is you maybe pick out a few of the questions that had the most illuminating answers and dig deeper into that and keep going. So I feel like this is a really good start. But again, I'd remember that everybody who was surveyed would love. Everybody always says the survey is no good because nobody called me. Have you ever heard that one? People say stuff like that all the time. Well, these are people who did answer, you know, who showed up to answer. So seeing their answers out there is a plus.
Yep. 100.
Hey. So I think we've heard now several different recommendations for follow-up, including that last one from Raphe that suggests that we make sure that we're communicating directly to the folks who were asked to respond to a survey so that they can see the results of the survey in sort of executive summary type fashion, and to maybe cherry pick a few of the questions or comments made in some of the open-ended responses to elevate by way of additional commentary that can be shared more broadly with the Empowerment Congress constituents and members. I think we're pretty much close to wrapping up the meeting. Do we have any feedback on a response to the letters that we submitted to the city council? Raphe, have you seen the letters that we sent?
He had to sign off.
Oh, he had to sign off? Okay. Darn. And then Courtney, I noticed in the chat, you are going to make sure that Carolina and others have seen those letters, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And that'll be posted on the website?
Yes, they will be.
Okay. Very good.
Listen, I think the other point that everyone should appreciate is part of the objective here it can't really be seen as um, subversive, but it is designed to um, amplify and basically say this is not inside baseball. It will not be reduced to that. This is the people's business, and the people have an opportunity and method by which they insert themselves. And that's the vehicle that the Empowerment Congress is attempting to provide. I think that's hugely important, and it goes precisely to the point that Raphe was making, and Bishop Smith, you've been at this with us at all of the ad hoc committees, the sub committees, for the purposes of saying, you know, we need to make this come alive in the context of our respective communities, whether they be sororities, houses of worship, name those entities. That's what this is really attempting to do in the most thoughtful way possible. There's a critique to be brought to bear about voting rights. This cannot be separate from the history of struggle that was viciously violated in those leaked tapes. It should be reminded, we should be reminded that that matter is still being addressed at the State Attorney General's office. So there's a lot in here, a lot to this, and it will be overlooked, swept under the rug, etc., unless we articulate this with clarity, and I might say with force. All right, I'm going back and take my nap now.
So I take it that's the benediction.
It's
we know that 69-year-olds deserve.
Don't even try it, man.
Deserve to take their naps on time.
You're talking about Harry now. Leave me alone. Leave me alone.
and if he's gonna take a nap, then he's gonna be real dangerous. That means he's gonna be up all night creating damage.
Brother Vincent,
Yes.
Brother
That's
Vincent,
fine.
yes, we have to acknowledge Sister Avis Ridley Thomas being on the line. We must acknowledge her.
Amen.
Yeah, for having to put up with the 69-year-old.
Yeah, and many others. Yes,
She's gonna do a Days of Dialogue on charter reform, homie. What you trying to say?
All right. It's funny. Okay. Well, I think unless there are any additional questions or comments or observations, we should probably conclude our meeting. We know what we plan on doing with the survey results. We know that there are specific proposals that arguably can be advanced, and that we have now until roughly February or March to begin to convey them. We probably have opportunities for advocacy with regard to several of the questions that were raised during this particular conversation. Specifically, the idea of a commission, the idea of figuring out the date when the redistricting, the independent redistricting commission winds up coming into effect, and some of the technicalities associated with that. I'm sure there are others, but by way of just summarizing just some of the things, we will review the notes, the comments in the chat, and figure out from here where we go. Are there any additional questions or comments before we conclude the call? Or I should say the meeting? Pastor Smart, would you like to give the benediction for this evening's meeting?
Father, we stop and we thank you for allowing us to come together. As difficult as issues like this are, with your empowerment and you filling us with power, we're able to be successful. We're able to overcome. We're able to struggle together and then be successful. So bless us as we leave now, and let us keep struggling, and let us keep this nation in our hearts. In thy name we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
Good night, you guys.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Good night.
All right.
Have a great night.
Bye.
All right.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.